I'll never forget the sound of rain on that bus roof. That night, it was as if the sky itself had decided to follow us out of town. Water hammering the windows, washing out the lines of streetlights as we pulled away from the curb. The bus smelled of wet coats, spilled coffee, and something sharp and anxious, like old metal. My hands were wrapped around a faded tote bag, knuckles white, and on either side of me, my grandchildren, Josh and Ellie, dozed and squirmed, their bodies restless even in sleep. Ellie's curls had flattened with the humidity, her thumb nestled against her cheek. Josh pretended not to notice me watching, but he always does. He's 14, too old for comfort, too young for real pride. I brushed a strand of hair from her forehead, willing myself to relax, to settle into this long ride that would take us halfway across the state to my daughter's apartment, the only real family home left to us. I didn't expect anything to happen. Most nights, nothing does. I'm just Grace Miller, a secretary for 30 years, retired now and too old to matter much in other people's stories. But that night, the storm in the aisle wasn't the one outside. It began in the fifth row, 2 seats ahead of us. A young woman, maybe late 20s, with hair pulled back and a toddler on her lap. She looked exhausted, edges frayed like the sleeves of her denim jacket. The child squirmed, whining, then crying, an animal sound, desperate. The mother murmured softly in a language I recognized from old neighbors, but couldn't place at first, cradling the child, rocking, her own voice shaking. Across the aisle, a man in a camouflage cap, mid-40s, hard eyes, voice too loud for a bus at night, sighed with annoyance. He shifted in his seat, then leaned into the aisle, voice booming over the hiss of rain. "Can't you shut that kid up? Some of us have to work in the morning." People flinched, ducked their heads. The driver flicked his eyes up in the rear view but said nothing. The young mother tightened her hold on the boy, rocking harder. I saw the panic building in her eyes, that helpless, burning edge every mother knows. The child's cries grew shriller, echoing off glass. The man muttered something under his breath, slurs maybe, or just old bitterness. Another passenger, a woman with a face drawn tight as string, said, "We can't have this all night." Whispered agreement, a rustle, as if the whole bus held its breath. Ellie woke, blinking, confused. Josh glanced up from his phone. I felt it in my chest, a knot of guilt and fear, and something deeper, some memory of being young and alone and out of place. For a moment, I hoped someone else would step in. The driver maybe, or one of the bigger men at the front, but nobody moved. I heard my mother's voice in my memory. "If you don't speak, you're part of the silence." I felt my hand move before my mind caught up. I unbuckled, stood, slowly, knees stiff, heart beating like a second storm, and stepped into the aisle. The man glared at me. "Sit down, lady. Don't make it worse." But I wasn't looking at him. I knelt beside the young mother, offering a small, uncertain smile. "May I asked, my voice so quiet I wondered if it could cut through the noise. She looked at me, startled. Tears streaked her cheeks. She nodded, clutching her son. I reached out, palms up, and in the softest voice I could manage, began to hum. It wasn't English, not exactly. It was the old lullaby my own mother sang to me when the world was too big, a song that once floated through the air of a Chicago apartment, Polish words curling with warmth and longing. I stumbled over the first few syllables, embarrassed, but then the melody returned, old muscle memory. I sang, "Ah kotki dwa, sarabure obidwa." The little boy's eyes blinked up at me, his cries quieting, drawn in by the rhythm, the familiarity, the way a song in your mother's tongue feels like a promise of safety. Silence spread across the bus, not tense but astonished. I could feel everyone listening, even the angry man, his mouth a thin line. The young mother's shoulders shook with silent sobs. She whispered, "Dziękuję, thank you," so quietly I almost missed it. I kept singing, softer now until the child's breaths evened out and his head sagged into his mother's arms, eyelids fluttering shut. The storm outside seemed to fade, the bus holding a strange golden hush. When the song ended, I realized my own eyes were wet. The mother squeezed my hand, whispering something in Polish. Gratitude, maybe, or blessing. I squeezed back, my own heart pounding, not sure what I had done, only knowing it was right. Behind me, someone coughed. The angry man muttered, "Well, guess that worked," and slumped back into his seat. The tension broke, replaced by embarrassed shuffling, sighs of relief, someone's nervous laughter. The driver caught my eye in the mirror and gave a small, grateful nod. I sat back beside Ellie, who blinked at me in awe. "Grandma, I didn't know you could sing like that," she whispered. I smiled, tucking her blanket around her shoulders. "Neither did I, sweetheart." "Neither did I." Josh nudged my arm. "Was that Polish?" His tone was skeptical, curious, a little impressed. "Yes," I said. "Something my mother taught me a long time ago." He grunted, not wanting to seem too interested, but I caught a glint of respect in his eyes. The rain pressed on, beating the roof in a steady rhythm. I leaned back, my body trembling with adrenaline and embarrassment and, oddly, joy. I'd stepped out of the shadows, if only for a moment, and the world hadn't ended. In fact, something in it had shifted, just a little. As the bus rumbled on through the darkness, I stared out the window, heart still racing. I remembered a lesson I'd learned but never spoken aloud. Sometimes it takes just 3 words, or the memory of a song, to change everything. And that night, for the first time in a long while, I let myself hope that maybe I could be more than the quiet woman in the second row. Maybe, just maybe, I could be someone who made a difference, even if only for one rainy night on a bus full of strangers. After the storm in the aisle had passed, the silence on the bus felt different, lighter but fragile, as if one sharp word could break it all over again. I sank back into my seat, feeling the lingering warmth of Ellie's small hand in mine. For a while, I only listened to the engine's hum and the rain's steady tattoo on the roof, hoping the world would let us all recover in peace. But when you're a grandmother and a mother before that, you learn quickly. Peace is a visitor, not a resident. Josh had slouched deeper into his seat, pretending to be absorbed in his phone, but I saw the way he peeked at me from beneath his lashes. Ellie was still wide-eyed, her thumb tracing circles on the blanket I'd wrapped around her. They were waiting, I realized, for me to explain myself. Maybe I was waiting too. I turned my face to the window, letting the glass cool my cheek. The night outside was ink black, punctuated by flashes of passing headlights and the vague outlines of trees bending beneath the weight of rain. Somewhere out there, my daughter was preparing a bed for us, setting out towels, probably worrying about my blood pressure, about the kids' comfort, about whether I'd manage the trip at all. I closed my eyes, letting the motion of the bus rock me, and drifted for a moment back in time. There was always a window in my life, a desk window in the old office, dusty but just high enough to catch a glimpse of the city, a kitchen window in the tiny apartment where I raised my daughter, the pane foggy from boiling pasta or soap bubbles. I was always the one by the window, half in the world, half outside it. I liked the distance it gave me. You can see everything from a window, the traffic jams, the neighbors, the storms. But you can also disappear, become part of the background, a witness but not a participant. I was good at that. 30 years as a secretary will teach you the art of vanishing, to make coffee, file paperwork, field phone calls, type up letters, all without leaving a footprint. Sometimes I wondered if anyone at the firm would remember me after I retired. Would they miss the way I kept track of birthdays? The quiet reminders to Mr. Ellis about his mother's appointment? The birthday cards I sent out, unsigned, just in case someone forgot? Languages were a kind of window too. My own mother was Polish. her lullabies full of longing for a country she'd never see again. She taught me just enough to make pierogi and say prayers at Christmas. In high school, I took up Spanish, partly for the grades, partly to impress a boy whose parents had crossed the border from Mexico. He never noticed me, but I kept the language. Later in my 20s, the office got a wave of new hires from Italy. So I borrowed cassette tapes from the library and listened at night, after Lisa was asleep. Italian was a song, bright and warm. Spanish, a dance. Polish, a prayer. None of them mine exactly, but all of them windows, ways to peek into other lives. No one ever asked why I bothered. Not my husband before he left. Not my daughter, who grew up as American as baseball and Halloween. Not my colleagues who thought it was cute that I could translate a menu or read the warning label on imported coffee. Grace, they'd say, is always ready to help. I was invisible, but I liked it that way, or told myself I did, until tonight. A bump in the road jolted me awake. The bus was still rumbling through the downpour, but the tension had shifted. The angry man in the camouflage cap was asleep, or at least pretending to be. The young mother had her son bundled tightly in her arms, both dozing at last. I glanced at Josh, who immediately looked away. "You okay?" I asked, my voice low, hoping not to wake Ellie. He shrugged, but I could see the curiosity flicker across his face. "That was weird, Grandma. You just stood up and started singing in another language." I smiled, more from nerves than pride. "I guess I did. Why do you know that?" He was still pretending he didn't care, but I recognized the tone, a mix of teenage skepticism and hope that maybe, just maybe, I'd reveal a secret about myself. "My mother was Polish," I said softly. "She used to sing that to me when I was scared or couldn't sleep. I guess I just remembered." He nodded, absorbing this small piece of family history. "Can you teach me?" That surprised me. "If you want, it's not hard. The words aren't so important as the feeling." He huffed, but I could see he liked the idea. For a few minutes, we sat quietly, the three of us in our little pocket of warmth. Ellie spoke next, her voice small but clear. "Grandma, are you magic?" That made me laugh. A real laugh, not the polite chuckle I used in the office for 40 years. "No, honey, I'm just old enough to have learned a few tricks." "But you knew exactly what to do," she insisted. "Even that lady was crying." I thought about that. Was it magic? Or just years of learning how to listen, really listen, when words didn't make sense? I've never thought of myself as special, but maybe tonight I was something more than a shadow at the window. I leaned my head against the glass, thinking about all the windows in my life, the things I'd seen but never touched. Love stories that weren't mine, adventures I watched from a distance, dreams I kept secret, even from myself. When Lisa, my daughter, was little, she would run to the window whenever she heard thunder. She was never afraid of storms, only fascinated. She'd press her palms to the glass, nose almost touching, and whisper, "Let's watch the sky get clean, Mommy." I'd stand behind her, arms around her shoulders, and feel, for a moment, like I was enough. Somewhere in the night, my phone buzzed. I checked it. A message from Lisa. "Are you okay? Is everyone safe?" I typed back, "We're fine. Just a little rain. See you soon. Love you." She replied instantly. "Love you too, Mom." I tucked the phone away, smiling to myself. My daughter worries, but she is strong. She has learned to carry the storms, too. Time moved strangely in the dark. The road unspooled ahead of us, a ribbon of black, punctuated by the occasional flash of headlights from the opposite direction. The rain showed no sign of stopping. Around me, people shifted, sighed, slept, or tried to. I could feel the aftershocks of the earlier drama, a sense that something important had happened, and that none of us would be quite the same by morning. I closed my eyes and listened to the soft snoring of the man in the camouflage cap, the whisper of the young mother comforting her child in Polish, the breathing of my grandchildren. My own heart still beat too fast, but I let myself rest. Before sleep could claim me, a jolt. The bus slowed, then stopped altogether. I opened my eyes, startled, as the driver announced in a tired voice, "Sorry, folks. Looks like we're stuck for a bit. Flooding up ahead. I'll keep you posted." A ripple of anxiety moved through the bus. People waking, murmuring, checking their phones for signal. The night pressed closer, thick and uncertain. I looked at my reflection in the window, hair flattened by humidity, eyes tired but awake. A woman older than she remembers, but maybe, just maybe, not as invisible as she thought. I reached for Ellie's hand again. "It's just a little rain," I whispered, though I didn't know if I meant it for her or for myself. For the first time in a long time, I wondered what would happen if I stopped watching the world from behind glass and dared to step all the way through. The minutes after the bus stopped felt like time itself had thickened, as if every breath was suspended between the rain outside and the hush inside. I could hear the driver muttering up front, his words blending into the percussion of the downpour. One of those storms that seemed to wash away the edges of everything, even certainty. I held Ellie's small hand in mine, her fingers cool but trusting. Josh leaned forward, pretending he was just stretching, though I knew he was trying to listen to every conversation on the bus at once. The air was restless, almost electric, filled with that uncertain waiting that comes when adults realize there's no easy answer. Somewhere near the front, a man was arguing with the driver, his voice a jumble of English and frustration, edged with the sharpness of someone who is used to being heard. He kept raising his voice, as if volume might clear away the floodwaters outside. I could make out only pieces. "We'll be here all night. Can't you call someone? People have work." And then suddenly, a burst of Spanish from a younger man 2 rows ahead. It was quick, anxious, too fast for the driver to follow. The driver's eyes darted to the mirror, caught my gaze for half a second, and I saw something there I hadn't noticed before. Not anger, but exhaustion. The kind that settles in the bones when you're responsible for strangers in the dark. I felt Ellie squeeze my hand. "Grace, are we going to be okay?" she whispered, voice so thin I could barely hear it above the rain. "Yes, Ellie, sweetheart. We're safe. It's just a little delay." I gave her hand a gentle squeeze in return, hoping my own confidence sounded more convincing than it felt. Josh cleared his throat. "Should we call Mom?" But there was no signal, just that little spinning icon on the screen, searching for a network that wasn't there. The arguing at the front grew louder. Now others were joining in, voices rising, overlapping, slicing through the heavy air. The Spanish-speaking man tried again, this time slower, his hands moving in the universal language of worry. The driver shook his head. "No hablo. Sorry, I don't understand." His voice trailing off into a helpless shrug. I felt that tug inside me, the one I'd spent years training myself to ignore, the impulse to step in, to help, to become visible when I'd rather be part of the wallpaper. But tonight, after that lullaby, after seeing the fear in a stranger's eyes and realizing I could be the bridge instead of the bystander, it felt wrong to stay quiet. I stood, slowly, every joint reminding me how long it had been since I'd done anything impulsive. Josh shot me a look, equal parts curiosity and embarrassment. "Grace, what are you doing?" he hissed under his breath. "Just wait here, Joshua. I'll be right back." Ellie's eyes were wide as saucers as I stepped into the aisle, steadying myself on the seat back with one hand, my tote clutched tight in the other. As I moved forward, the bus seemed to shrink, every eye tracking me, whispers trailing behind my shoulders. I reached the driver and the anxious passenger, who was trying now in halting English. "My wife, my son." They wait for me. Please, I work early. I do not know. But the words tangled, fell. The driver looked relieved to see me. Ma'am, can you? I don't, I don't know what he wants. I turned to the man and answered gently in his own language. Soft, careful Spanish, dusted off from those late nights with the cassette tapes, the way I'd once practiced rolling my R's in the empty kitchen while Lisa was asleep. Señor, no se preocupe. Estamos todos atrapados por la lluvia. El conductor está haciendo todo lo posible. His eyes widened, first in surprise, then in gratitude, then something like shame. I kept talking, my words slow, my hands open, bridging the gap between him and the driver. Todos queremos llegar a casa, pero esta tormenta, no podemos controlarla. Lo importante es mantener la calma. He nodded, once, twice, then slumped back in his seat, some of the tension draining from his shoulders. The driver exhaled, relief written in every line of his tired face. I turned back to him, switching back to English. He's just worried, like everyone else. He's got a family waiting, and he's afraid of losing his job if he's late. Maybe if you explain what you know, people might settle down. The driver gave a grateful little laugh. I wish you'd ride my bus every night, Grace. You've got the magic touch. I almost smiled but felt the blush rise in my cheeks. It's not magic, just years of listening. As I made my way back to my seat, the bus seemed quieter, still tense, still uncertain, but quieter. Someone murmured, "Did you hear that? She speaks Spanish." Another voice replied, "No wonder the kids are so calm. She's the real boss here." I sat down. Ellie leaned against my shoulder, her voice small. "Grace, do you know all the languages?" I laughed softly. "No, Ellie. Just enough to say hello and help when someone needs it." Josh stared at me, his forehead creased. "You never told us you knew all that." I shrugged. "I never thought it mattered much, Joshua. It was just something I picked up, in case I needed it." I saw him watching me, weighing this new version of me against the old. For a moment, I wondered if I'd become a stranger to my own family, or if I was finally showing them the real me. Outside, the rain hammered down, relentless. I found myself remembering old days at the office, people rushing in with deadlines and dramas, my job to smooth things over, to translate not just words but moods. I was always the one they called for when a client from out of town arrived, when the copier broke down, when tempers flared in the break room. I never minded. I was useful, even if invisible. But tonight felt different. Tonight I wasn't just translating language. I was translating fear into hope, panic into patience. I wondered what my own mother would think if she saw me now. Her daughter, the shy girl who used to whisper prayers in Polish, stepping into a storm and finding her voice. The bus lurched as the driver tried the ignition again, a hopeful whine, then a sigh as the engine settled back into idle. Someone at the back groaned. "We're never getting out of here." Another passenger, an older woman with a thick accent, maybe Eastern European, murmured, "It's good we are together, no?" Her words hung in the air, tentative, a thread of connection in the chaos. I caught her eye, offered a smile, and she nodded, once, slowly, as if passing a secret. Ellie fell asleep, her breath warm against my sleeve. Josh stared out the window, tapping his phone absently, lost in thought. I let my head rest against the seat, watching the patterns of rain snake down the glass, rivers flowing nowhere, shimmering in the glow of the emergency lights. The tension in my chest had loosened, replaced by something else, something close to pride and a little bit of sorrow for all the times I'd hidden behind the wallpaper. I closed my eyes and let the sounds wash over me. The whispered conversations, the patter of rain, the low hum of worry and hope. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel invisible. I felt essential. And as the bus sat stranded in the storm, a small part of me wondered, if I could translate all this chaos into something gentle, something good, maybe, just maybe, I could teach my grandchildren that you don't have to be loud to matter. Sometimes it only takes a few words, spoken in the right moment with the right heart, to change the whole night. When I opened my eyes again, the world felt a little softer, as if the rain had washed away more than just the road ahead. I squeezed Ellie's hand, glanced at Joshua, and let myself breathe in the quiet, just for a moment, knowing that sometimes even a grandmother can be the storm that calms the room. The darkness inside the bus deepened as the hours pressed on, thick as velvet, and the only things I could see clearly were the reflections in the window, my own face, lined and tired, the ghostly shapes of seats and shoulders behind me, and the faint glimmer of passing headlights on rain-slick glass. Outside, the storm refused to ease up, thrumming steady and relentless on the metal roof. Inside, the world felt cocooned and adrift, strangers forced together in a tin can by circumstance and bad weather, each of us clinging to small comforts in the dark. Ellie had finally drifted off, her curls fanned across my lap, mouth parted in the pure trust of sleep. Joshua sat across the aisle now, earphones in, but no music playing. I could tell by the way his thumb hovered above the screen, by the way his eyes flickered from the window to my face, searching for answers I might not have. The tension that had crackled through the bus after we'd stopped had faded, replaced by a heavy, uncertain hush. People whispering in twos and threes, or staring out at nothing at all. From up front, the driver's voice crackled over the speaker, soft, apologetic, but with a kind of weary warmth I hadn't noticed before. Looks like we'll be here a while longer, folks. Road crews are trying, but the flooding's still too high. I appreciate your patience. I know it's not easy. There was a pause, then a small laugh, almost shy. If anyone's got a good story, now would be the time. No one spoke at first. We all just listened to the storm. I felt the weight of years settling in my chest, the decades spent watching from the edges, learning the shapes of other people's lives. How many stories had I heard in waiting rooms, break rooms, lobbies, only to keep my own quiet, tucked away like old letters in a drawer? I'd always been the one who listened, who nodded, who soothed, who blended in. Tonight, though, something had shifted. Maybe it was the way my voice had risen, unplanned in that lullaby. Maybe it was the surprise in Joshua's eyes, or the way the young mother's hand had clung to mine in the aisle. Or maybe it was just the rain, a kind of absolution, washing away the need to hide. A voice cut through the quiet, low, hesitant. "My grandmother used to sing to us, too," said the older woman with the accent, her English lilting but sure. "In the old country, we sang when the power went out. My brother was scared of thunder, so we sang louder than the storm." Her story hung in the air, fragile as a spider's thread. A few people chuckled softly. I watched her, saw the shimmer of memory in her eyes, and felt a twinge of kinship. The young mother, her name I learned was Maria, shifted her son onto her shoulder and offered, "In my village, we told stories during storms. My abuelo said the wind was the voice of the saints. He would sing, but I never learned the words." She laughed, a little embarrassed, and kissed her boy's head. I caught her gaze and smiled. "You don't have to remember all the words. Sometimes just the melody is enough." That's when I realized they were all looking at me, expectant, a little shy, as if I might be the one to break the hush. I felt heat rise in my cheeks. I I don't really have a story," I began, but Joshua piped up from across the aisle. "You do, Grace. You sang for that little boy. That was a story." His voice, so matter-of-fact, was impossible to ignore. I laughed, the sound brittle at first, then true. "Well, I suppose I do remember some songs. My mother used to sing in Polish, but she also knew a lullaby in Italian. She said it was for luck, for when you miss someone far away. I swallowed, surprised at how tight my throat felt. Would anyone mind if I tried it? It's been a long time. There was a murmur of assent, a shifting of bodies, people leaning just a little closer in the dimness. I closed my eyes, let myself drift back to a kitchen bathed in afternoon light, to the clatter of pans and the smell of yeast and flour, to my mother's voice rising above it all. I started soft, hesitant, the old words tumbling out with the melody, more feeling than memory. Nina nana, Nina oh, questo bimbo a chilo do. As I sang, the bus faded, the storm, the seats, even my own nervousness. I could feel the song settle over us like a blanket, hear the breath catch in Maria's throat, see the older woman's eyes close in recognition. The melody was a kind of magic, and for a few precious minutes, we were all children again, safe in the warmth of a mother's arms. When I finished, there was a hush, thicker than before, but somehow gentler. Maria wiped her eyes. The older woman reached across the aisle and patted my hand. Thank you. That was beautiful. My mother, she sang that too when we had nothing but hope. Even the man in the camouflage cap who'd complained earlier seemed different, his jaw softer, his eyes on the floor. He cleared his throat and muttered, "Reminds me of a song my granddad sang in German, but I don't remember the tune anymore." The driver, emboldened, shared a story about his own mother, who made up silly rhymes to cheer him when he was small. One by one, people offered pieces of themselves, jokes, memories, snippets of half-forgotten songs. I felt something loosen in my chest. For the first time all night, the bus didn't feel like a cage or a place of waiting. It felt like a circle, of strangers, yes, but strangers willing to risk a little honesty. Even Joshua, always so careful not to seem impressed, looked at me with something new in his eyes, a quiet pride that made my heart ache in the best way. Ellie stirred in her sleep, brow furrowing as thunder rattled the bus. I stroked her hair, still humming softly, and watched as she relaxed back into dreams. I thought of all the times I'd sung to Lisa, my daughter, when she was a baby, and how those songs had been my shield against loneliness. I realized now they'd been hers too. The rain eased for a moment, and the silence grew companionable. I leaned back, closing my eyes, letting myself just be. No more hiding, no more shrinking into the wallpaper. I was here. I mattered. Someone started a new song, haltingly. Maria, I think, in Spanish, her voice thin but brave. Others joined in, some humming, some whistling, the melodies overlapping and merging in the dark. It didn't matter if we got the words wrong. What mattered was that, for a while, we remembered what it was to belong. When the storm returned, louder, angrier, it felt less threatening, as if the music inside the bus could hold it at bay. I thought about all the years I'd spent waiting for permission to take up space, to be heard. And I promised myself, quietly, that if I ever got the chance again, I wouldn't let my song go unsung. The minutes stretched and folded, time unraveling into a tapestry of voices and laughter and memory. For one long, impossible hour, we were no longer strangers. We were travelers together, on a road that had no name, in a night that might never end, held by nothing more than a few old songs and the hope that morning would find us safe and whole. As the bus rocked gently in the dark, I glanced down at Ellie and Joshua, at their peaceful faces and growing wonder. I thought of my mother, her hands, her voice, her strength, and felt her with me, as real as the rain. And somewhere, deep in my bones, I understood at last. Songs are not just for children, not just for bedtime. They're bridges stitched together from longing and courage, carrying us across the loneliest nights. I was no longer just the woman by the window. I was part of the music, part of the story. And for the first time in a long, long while, I was not afraid of being seen. It was near midnight when the driver's weary voice rose once more over the quiet. All right, folks, it looks like there's a tow truck finally making its way up the road, but it might take a while. I'll step outside to flag them down when they get close. Stay warm, everybody. You could hear the relief and the fatigue braided together in every syllable. For a heartbeat, the bus felt like the last lit room in a darkened world. Rain still beating a tattoo on the roof, shadows moving on every window. I ran my palm over the glass, tracing the rivulets as they streaked downward, thinking about all the things that flowed from one person to another. A word, a song, a touch, even just a look. It was funny, really, how sometimes we could be trapped together by accident and find ourselves connected in ways we never could have imagined. Ellie mumbled something in her sleep, her hand seeking mine even as she turned her face to the seat. I smoothed the hair from her forehead, my thumb tracing the same pattern my own mother once traced for me, a pattern I hadn't even realized I remembered until now. There was a shift in the air, a hum of restlessness or perhaps hope. Maria, the young mother, was whispering quietly to her son, her words rising and falling in the gentle cadence of Spanish lullabies. The older woman who'd shared her thunderstorm stories had opened her purse and was offering peppermints to the children in nearby seats. Even the man in the camouflage cap looked changed, his gruffness faded, watching the rain as if searching for something softer in it. Just then, blue and orange lights flashed across the windows, and voices rose outside, unfamiliar, urgent, carrying a kind of rhythm that was both strange and oddly cheerful. I leaned closer to the glass and saw, through the rain-streaked distortion, a battered truck with three men in heavy jackets stepping out. They were speaking rapidly, and their laughter carried even through the storm. I caught only snippets. Allez, vide! And my heart skipped. French. Not the polished kind you learn in a classroom, but the quick, clipped syllables of workers, of people used to making themselves understood, with hands and voices both. The driver hurried to the door, umbrella forgotten, his shoes already soaked. He exchanged a flurry of gestures and raised voices with the men from the truck. But after a few seconds, it was clear. They weren't understanding one another. The crew's foreman waved his arms, trying to pantomime a question, while the driver's face grew more and more confused. The tension began to seep back into the bus, people shifting, muttering, wondering if we would be stranded until morning. I felt the familiar flutter in my chest, the old fear, the urge to stay quiet and hope someone else would know what to do. But then Maria looked at me, eyes wide and uncertain, and even Joshua, suddenly so much older than his 14 years, whispered, "Grace, can you help?" My feet moved before my doubts could catch up. I eased out of my seat, careful not to wake Ellie, and made my way up the aisle, past the man in the cap, past the old woman offering mints, past Maria clutching her son. At the front, the driver turned. Hope and desperation mingled in his eyes. "Grace, I mean, do you speak French?" His voice was almost pleading. "Enough to get by," I said, my own voice steadier than I felt. I pushed the door open, letting a blast of cold, wet air into the bus, and stepped into the storm. The ground squished under my shoes, rain soaking me instantly, but I squared my shoulders and moved closer to the tow truck crew. They greeted me with surprise. A woman, gray-haired and small, stepping out of the safety of the bus into their world of mud and diesel and hurried words. I smiled, letting my voice be as open and friendly as possible. "Bonsoir, messieurs. Nous sommes bloqués et le chauffeur ne parle pas français. Je peux aider?" Their face lit up. A flurry of French spilled out, too fast, but I caught enough. "La route est fermée. Beaucoup d'eau. Il faut reculer et tourner?" I nodded, repeating the words back, asking the right questions, making sure I understood. For the next few minutes, I became the bridge between driver and crew, between their world and ours. I relayed instructions, calmed fears, translated questions about the children and the elderly. The foreman laughed and patted my shoulder, his voice booming. Vous êtes le vrai chef, I see. And I couldn't help but laugh too, the sound mingling with thunder. I hadn't felt that alive, that needed in years. Back inside, I relayed the plan. The bus would have to reverse carefully, with the crew guiding us past the worst of the flooding, and then be towed to a dry patch where we could wait for daylight or another bus. There were murmurs of relief, a scattering of applause, and the driver offered me his seat for a moment, his eyes shining. Grace, I owe you more than just a ride tonight. But it wasn't just me. It was everyone on that bus, suddenly listening, trusting, offering what they could. The older woman handed out more peppermints. Maria sang softly to her son. Joshua and a couple of other teenagers even tried to help by holding up phone flashlights through the fogged windows, making it easier for the crew to see the wheels. We all found a way to be useful, no matter how small. As the bus slowly, carefully reversed, jerking, then inching forward, tires spinning in the mud, I watched out the window, feeling the storm's energy passing through me. The crew's shouts, the driver's careful hands on the wheel, the nervous laughter of the passengers. Somehow we were all moving together, each of us a part of the solution. It felt miraculous. There was a moment, as we finally cleared the deepest water, when everyone on the bus seemed to exhale at once. I heard someone, maybe Maria, maybe the old woman, begin to clap, and soon the whole bus joined in, a ragged cheer rising above the engine noise. I laughed, tears mixing with the rain on my cheeks, and let myself be seen, fully, for the first time in a long while. When I sat back down, Joshua's eyes found mine. I didn't know you could do that, Grace, he said, his voice soft with awe. I didn't know I could either, Joshua, I admitted, brushing the damp hair from my face. But sometimes you have to try. Sometimes you're the only bridge there is. Ellie stirred and blinked up at me, half awake. Did we move, Grace? Are we safe now? I kissed her forehead, breathing in the scent of rain and peppermint. Yes, Ellie. We're safe. We're moving again. The bus rolled forward, away from the worst of the flood, the storm still singing overhead. I leaned my head against the window, my heart full of the night's chaos and the strange, beautiful unity we'd found. For a while, I just listened, to the engine, to the rain, to the soft voices of strangers who had become, if not friends, then at least companions in a story we would all remember. Somewhere along the road, as the tow truck's lights faded behind us, I realized I no longer felt invisible. I was a bridge across languages, across fear, across loneliness. And in the shelter of that crowded, damp, exhausted bus, I discovered that sometimes, just sometimes, being the bridge means you get to cross over too. As the bus rolled on through the wet, shining blackness, it was as if we had all survived something together, an ordeal that turned strangers into a kind of makeshift family. For the first time all night, the rain on the windows sounded almost friendly. The floodwaters had faded into memory, and ahead of us somewhere was the promise of morning. I glanced around and saw how the night had changed us. The older woman, her name was Rosa, I finally learned, offered her last peppermint to Maria's little boy, her hands shaking just a little. Maria, in turn, tucked a small blanket around the old woman's shoulders, as if passing along the same comfort she'd given her son. The man in the camouflage cap had shed his bristly attitude and was now swapping stories about his own children with the driver, who, for the first time, laughed so loud that Ellie woke up and looked at me with wonder in her eyes. Grace, are we almost there? She whispered, rubbing her face. I hugged her close, pressing a kiss into her hair. Not quite yet, Ellie, but we're on our way, I promise. The promise felt good to say. It sounded true, and for the first time in a long while, I believed it. People were talking in low voices, sometimes in English, sometimes in Spanish, sometimes in the broken, hopeful mix of both. Rosa told Maria about the village in Italy where she was born, how the air there always smelled of lemons, how her mother hung sheets to dry in the sun. Maria smiled shyly, describing her own hometown in El Salvador, the markets, the music, the feeling of being surrounded by cousins and uncles and neighbors every night. The stories tumbled out, gentle and easy, with no room left for anger or complaint. Joshua watched all this with his eyes wide open. He'd never seen adults, especially strangers, share themselves so freely. "Do you think people always get like this during storms?" he asked quietly, not wanting the others to hear. "No, Joshua," I replied, "not always. But sometimes it takes a storm to show us what's possible." He was quiet a moment, then said, "I hope I remember this when I'm older." I squeezed his hand. "I hope so too." There was a moment when everyone grew quiet, listening to the engine hum, the gentle creak of the bus frame, the soft breathing of sleeping children. I thought about all the silences I'd lived through, those long days at the office when my voice felt small, the years after my husband left, the evenings when Lisa was little, and I was so tired I could only sing to her in whispers. I had spent so long hiding in the shadows, keeping my heart tucked safely away. But tonight, I'd let it open. And in doing so, I had invited others to open theirs too. Maria touched my arm, her eyes shining with gratitude. "Grace, I don't know how to thank you for the song, for the words, for helping us all." Her English was careful, each word weighed, but her meaning was clear. "You saved us tonight." I shook my head, a little embarrassed. "Oh, Maria, I only did what anyone would do." She smiled, a sad, knowing smile. "No, Grace, not everyone does. Some people close their hearts, even when others are hurting. You, you opened yours." I let those words settle around me, gentle as the lullabies I'd sung earlier. I realized how long it had been since anyone noticed, truly noticed, the small things I'd done, the quiet gifts, the listening, the translations, the invisible care. I realized too that sometimes you have to open your heart wide enough for others to see inside, even if it feels awkward, even if you're afraid. The bus rattled over a bump and laughter bubbled up as we all grabbed for the armrests. Rosa grinned and shook her head. "It's like a ride at the fair," she declared. Someone in the back started humming a tune, and Maria joined in, the melody winding through the bus like a gentle river. Ellie, still sleepy, rested her head on my lap and began to sing along, soft and off-key but perfect. Joshua surprised me by reaching across the aisle and offering his phone to Maria's little boy, showing him a silly video. The boy giggled and Maria's eyes filled with tears, the good kind. "Thank you, Joshua," she said, and I saw the flush of pride spread across his cheeks. He'd always been cautious, holding himself apart, but tonight I saw a kindness in him I hoped would last. People began to share more, recipes, advice, even a few jokes. The man in the camouflage cap, whose name was Pete, confessed he'd never tasted pupusas. Maria laughed and promised to make them if he ever visited her. Rosa taught Ellie how to say "good morning" in Italian. The driver chimed in with a story about his grandmother's pierogi. All the old divisions, language, age, suspicion, faded, replaced by a sense of belonging I hadn't felt in years. As dawn crept toward the horizon, coloring the sky with a fragile gray, I realized we'd all been given something precious. Not just a safe passage through the storm, but a chance to remember ourselves, to see for a moment what we could be for one another. The storm had broken us open, and we had chosen again and again to reach out instead of shrinking back. I gazed at my grandchildren, at Joshua, a little less guarded, and Ellie humming lullabies in languages she'd never known before, and felt a warmth in my chest I'd almost forgotten. You see, children, I said quietly, this is what it means to be part of the world. Not just to live in it, but to truly belong to it. To open your heart to others, even if you're scared. Joshua looked at me, his expression softer than I'd ever seen. Grace, do you think people like us can make a difference? I mean, we're just normal. I smiled, reaching for his hand. Oh, Joshua, the world is made by people like us. Most of the great things that ever happened, friendships, kindness, forgiveness, didn't come from heroes in books. They came from someone who dared to care, even when it was easier not to. He seemed to think about that for a long time, staring out at the new light breaking through the windows. I think I want to remember this forever, he whispered almost to himself. So did I. When the bus finally pulled into a rest stop, just a humble diner by the side of the road, the sign flickering in the morning mist, it felt as if we were arriving somewhere sacred. People stood and stretched, rubbing their backs, gathering bags and blankets. But nobody rushed to leave. Instead, we moved slowly, hugging, exchanging phone numbers, promising to stay in touch. Maria hugged me tightly, her son nestled against her chest. Rosa kissed my cheek, her voice warm in my ear. You are a good woman, Grace. Never forget that. Ellie tugged on my sleeve. Grace, can we do this again sometime? Can we sing and meet new friends? I smiled, brushing her hair away from her eyes. Of course, Ellie. Anytime you want. All you have to do is open your heart, and the world will find you. As we stepped off the bus and into the cool morning air, I felt lighter than I had in years. My heart, once so carefully guarded, was now open and full. I looked at Joshua and Ellie, at the people who had been strangers only hours before, and realized that sometimes the hardest journeys give us the best gifts. We walked into the diner together. New friends, old fears laid to rest, our hearts stitched together by a night of rain and kindness. And as I glanced back at the bus, glistening in the pale light, I understood that the story of this journey would live inside all of us, long after the storm had passed, long after we'd gone our separate ways. In that moment, I whispered a quiet thank you to the rain, to my mother, to every open heart that had carried me here. And I promised myself and my grandchildren that I would never again let fear keep me from reaching out, because I knew now that in the end, it is open hearts that carry us through the darkness and into the dawn. Dawn crept up slowly, almost shy after the night's relentless storm, gray and misty, brushing pale gold across the horizon as our battered bus rolled through puddled streets toward the next small town. My bones ached with fatigue, but my heart felt lighter than it had in years. I watched the world outside, everything softened by the night's rain. Fields glimmered, trees glistened, and each house we passed looked, for a fleeting moment, like a promise of shelter and welcome. Inside the bus, the spell of the night had not yet broken. Some people slept, curled under coats or holding each other close, but most of us sat in a sort of waking dream. Maria cradled her son, humming quietly, her voice weaving between English and Spanish as naturally as a river finds its course. Rosa spoke to Pete about her granddaughter, showing photos from her wallet, and Pete listened, his face transformed, no trace left of the brusque stranger from the night before. Joshua leaned his head on the cool window, watching the sky bloom with light. I reached across the aisle, smoothing the hair from his forehead, feeling the warmth of him seep into my palm. He looked up at me with sleepy eyes, a little boy and a young man all at once. Are we almost there, Grace? He asked, voice rough from too little sleep and too much feeling. Almost, Joshua, I whispered, smiling so he would know he was safe. A little farther. Ellie, still drowsy, snuggled against my side and sighed. I like bus adventures, but I wish we were home already. I laughed softly, pressing a kiss to her temple. Home is waiting, Ellie, and we'll bring this night with us, wherever we go. As we neared the edge of town, the driver slowed the bus and reached for the microphone, his voice surprisingly bright. All right, everybody, this is the last stop before the transfer. If you need directions or help, let me know. And thank you for being the best bunch of passengers I've had in 20 years. His words drew scattered applause, shy laughter, a few good-natured cheers. People gathered their things, stretching sore muscles, exchanging last words and phone numbers. Maria hugged me tightly, her son peeking shyly over her shoulder. Grace, you are welcome in our home anytime. We don't have much, but we have music and stories and good food. Her gratitude settled into my chest like a warm stone. Thank you, Maria, I said, meaning it with every part of me. I'll bring my grandchildren, and we'll sing together again. Pete shook my hand, his grip rough but sincere. If you ever need anything, you call me, you hear? I owe you. More than I can say. He cleared his throat, embarrassed, but I squeezed his hand and smiled. We all owe each other, Pete. That's what keeps the world turning. Rosa kissed both my cheeks. Once, twice, her perfume soft and old-fashioned. You are a good woman, Grace. A bridge. You remind me of my mother, and that is the highest praise I know. I blinked back tears, brushing my fingers across my cheek. Thank you, Rosa. I'll remember your stories, always. As the bus emptied, the driver caught my eye in the mirror, a crooked grin on his face. Grace, don't be a stranger. We could use more nights like this, though maybe with less rain. I chuckled, shaking my head. Let's make it a sunny day next time. He winked, then turned his attention to the road ahead. The rest stop was a modest place, a low building with a flickering sign, the parking lot shining with puddles. We gathered on the sidewalk, blinking at the soft new light. A young woman in a bright red jacket waved us over. She was a volunteer from the community center, here to help travelers rerouted by the storm. Hot coffee and muffins inside, she called, cheerful as the morning itself. Come on, everyone, warm up. We've got news crews asking about the bus adventure of the year. Joshua snorted at that, rolling his eyes. News crews? They're going to want a picture of us in our pajamas, Grace. Ellie giggled, tugging my sleeve. Will you be famous now? I grinned, shaking my head. No, Ellie. I think I'd rather be remembered by friends than strangers. But let's go inside, before your stomach starts rumbling louder than that thunder. Inside, the air was warm and rich with the smell of coffee, cinnamon, and fresh-baked bread. People clustered in groups, sharing stories, showing photos on their phones. The young volunteer handed out cups, her eyes sparkling. Everyone's talking about your bus, you know. The driver says it was like a big family in there all night long. I smiled, feeling pride and humility mix in my chest. I glanced at Joshua, who looked taller somehow, and at Ellie, whose laughter rang out like a bell as she made friends with a little girl from another family. I realized that something in me had shifted, like a door had opened, letting in all the possibility of the new day. The news reporter was a gentle-faced woman with a notepad and a kind voice. She approached our table with a smile. Excuse me, would you mind sharing your story? People love to hear about kindness in hard times. I hesitated, glancing at Joshua and Ellie, but Joshua nodded. Grace, tell them. Maybe it'll help someone else. I found my voice shy but steady. We just listened to each other. We sang songs. We helped where we could. I think that's all anyone really wants, isn't it? To be heard and to belong, even for one night. The reporter scribbled, eyes shining. That's beautiful. May I quote you? I shrugged, suddenly bashful. You can, but please, make sure you mention Maria and Rosa and Pete and the driver. It was everyone, not just me. She nodded, already moving to find the others. Joshua grinned at me, nudging my arm. See? You're the hero, Grace. I rolled my eyes, but my heart soared. When we stepped back outside, the world was glistening and bright, the storm already a memory. Our bus had gone, replaced by smaller shuttles ready to take us the rest of the way home. We said our goodbyes, quick hugs, promises to visit, a last round of laughter, and then we boarded, each of us carrying the night with us like a hidden flame. As the shuttle wound through winding roads, past fields wet with dew and new sunlight, I found myself lost in thought. I watched Joshua and Ellie chat quietly, retelling their favorite moments, their voices filled with awe and affection. I thought about all the people who had come together, how the world can surprise you, even when you think you've seen it all. I closed my eyes and leaned back, letting the motion of the road rock me. My mind drifted to my daughter Lisa, waiting for us at home, probably worried, probably checking her phone for news. I thought about what I would tell her, how a bus full of strangers became something so much more, how a storm gave us a gift we'd never expected, and I promised myself that I would carry this night forward, that I would keep my heart open, keep reaching out, keep singing the old songs when they were needed, that I would not let fear or habit or the tired ache of age close the door I had finally dared to open. The shuttle turned down the final street, and there it was, Lisa's apartment, lights on in the window, a silhouette watching for us. I felt Ellie's hand slip into mine, Joshua's shoulder press against my arm, and I smiled. "We're home, children," I said softly. "We made it." As we stepped out, morning sun warming our faces, I looked up at the sky, clouds broken, blue peeking through, and breathed in the sweet, rain-washed air. I knew in that instant that we were changed, that the night on the bus would live in us, quietly, like a song remembered in the darkness. And as we walked toward Lisa's open arms, I whispered to myself, "Thank you, Storm, for showing us the way. Thank you, friends, for opening your hearts. Thank you, world, for letting us belong, if only for one unforgettable night." I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but as the dawn broke over the road behind us, I knew I was ready, open-hearted, unafraid, and finally home. It's been a month since that night on the bus, a month since the storm, the songs, the peppermints, and the bridges built out of kindness and words. Some days it feels like a dream, something my heart invented on a lonely night and tucked away with the rest of my secrets. But then I'll find a message on my phone, a photo of Maria's son with paint on his cheeks, or a cheerful voice note from Rosa telling me about the garden she started in her daughter's backyard. And I know it was all real. We changed each other. I changed. Life has mostly returned to its gentle routines. The world is quieter than a bus in the rain, but in some ways, it feels so much fuller. Joshua still brings up the story sometimes when he's feeling brave or uncertain. "Grace, remember that time you spoke French to those men in the storm?" And Ellie has learned to sing the Italian lullaby word for word. Their mother, Lisa, laughed the first time she heard it and then cried, hugging me so tightly that I almost forgot how to let go. My days are simple. I water the houseplants. I bake banana bread for the neighbors. I answer the phone when Lisa calls, always too busy, always grateful I'm there. But I've added something new, something I never would have dreamed of before that long night. Every Tuesday afternoon, I walk 3 blocks to the library with a bag full of books and a thermos of tea. The room they give me is small, just a circle of old chairs and one window that lets in golden light as the sun shifts toward evening. Sometimes there are 5 of us, sometimes 12, never the same group twice. Rosa is almost always there, offering peppermints and soft-voiced encouragement. Maria and her son come when they can. She brings sweet bread, and he brings his joy. Even Pete showed up once, awkward in his heavy work boots, surprising himself by sharing a story from his own childhood in perfect stumbling Spanish. We call it Conversation Circle, but it's more than just words. We bring recipes and old photographs and laughter that starts out shy and then spills everywhere. We tell each other the stories our mothers told us, the ones we thought we'd forgotten. Sometimes someone brings a song. Sometimes someone brings their fear. Always we listen. Always we belong. I find myself telling more stories than I ever did before. About my mother, her Polish lullabies, and her fierce hope. About the office job. About translating anger into understanding. About learning to speak softly but insistently until the right person heard me. Sometimes I sing, and sometimes I just hum, and sometimes I close my eyes and let the voices of others wash over me. I am not afraid to be seen anymore. I am not afraid to let my heart be known. One afternoon after everyone else has left, Rosa lingers by the window, looking out at the world beyond the glass. She is quiet, her hands folded in her lap, a wistful smile touching her lips. You know, Grace, she says, you remind me of my mother, not because of your singing, but because you make a place for everyone. You make the room bigger just by being in it. I feel the tears sting, quick and sharp, but I let them come. I've learned that sometimes tears are the only way the heart knows how to say thank you. That night at home, I find myself staring at the rain as it falls softly on the street outside. My apartment is small but filled with warmth. The low hum of the heater, the smell of fresh bread, the faint music of Ellie's laughter coming from the hallway. Joshua sits at the table, pretending to read but really just waiting for me to notice him. Lisa's voice floats from the kitchen, and for a moment I am surrounded by all the lives I've loved, all the lives that have touched mine. I think of the bus, of the storm, of that moment when I stood up and sang for a stranger's child. I think of how small and frightened I felt, and how, in the silence that followed, I found a strength I didn't know I had. I remember the hush, the looks, the weight of every eye turned toward me. I remember the way Maria's hand found mine, the way Joshua's voice trembled when he called me brave, the way Ellie looked at me as if I'd done something magical. And I know now what I couldn't have known then, that the magic wasn't in the singing or in the words. The magic was in choosing, just for a moment, to open my heart wide enough to let someone else in. Sometimes, when I'm feeling small or tired or invisible again, I remember what I told my grandchildren that night as the bus rumbled toward home. Sometimes you're only 3 words away from changing a life. Sometimes all it takes is, "Can I help?" or "I am here." Sometimes all it takes is the courage to speak, even when your voice shakes. I see it in the eyes of the people at the library, in the smiles of my grandchildren, in the quiet way Lisa says, "Thank you," at the end of a hard day. I see it in myself, in the way I hold my head a little higher now, in the way I greet strangers, in the way I let myself be loved. The world is still hard sometimes. There are storms, big and small, that rattle the windows and test our patience. But I am no longer just the woman by the window. I am the woman who sings, who listens, who builds bridges, who holds space for laughter and sorrow and hope. If I could tell you one thing, just one, from all these years, from all these long nights and bright mornings, it would be this: don't wait. Don't wait for permission or for the storm to pass. Don't wait for someone else to speak first. You are always, always only 3 words away from changing everything. For yourself, for someone you love, for a stranger in the dark. Say them. Offer the song, the hand, the story. Open the door, open your heart, and let yourself belong. Because sometimes the smallest act, a lullaby, a translation, a shared piece of peppermint, is what turns a night of fear into a memory of belonging. And sometimes the person who needs you most is sitting right next to you, just waiting for you to say, "I am here." And so, as the rain falls softly outside my window, as my grandchildren laugh in the hallway, and my daughter's voice calls me to dinner, I remind myself again and again, there is no magic more powerful than kindness, no language more universal than love, And no journey more important than the one that brings us together. Sometimes all it takes is 3 words, and sometimes that's enough.